right in the middle of the dinner table under the yellow lights of the Ponderosa Ridge Villa, in front of more than 20 people, raising their glasses to celebrate Father's Day. My daughter tossed into my hand a crumpled $3 lottery ticket as casually as throwing away a cleaning rag, then turned around, wrapped her arms around her father-in-law, and gave that man a nearly $10,000 yacht cruise, paid for with money quietly taken from my own account. And the whole room burst into laughter, laughter mixed with looks of pity aimed at me as if I were nothing more than an outdated object put on display. I'm not telling this to ask for sympathy. I'm telling it because some truths only need to be placed in the right spot. If you've ever seen someone belittled by the very person they raised, leave A and tell me where you're listening from. And if you want to keep walking with stories where truth doesn't need to shout and still has somewhere to stand, I would sincerely appreciate and be grateful for a subscription from you. Please allow me to tell my story. That night, the wind on Ponderosa Ridge blew the way it only does in Boulder in late spring. Cold, dry, carrying the scent of pine resin and the very clear feeling that you're standing just a little lower than the sky. I pulled my old pickup over to the curb, shut off the engine, sat for a few more seconds in the dark, listening to the motor cool down and watching the yellow light from the villa up above spill across the windshield. Kara's house, Eric's. The new family people had recently taken to mentioning in front of me with voices just a bit too cheerful. That house had stood solid through its first year on money that quietly flowed out of the shoe workshop by the lake, through hands more familiar with the smell of leather than the smell of celebratory wine. That part wasn't in tonight's story. Tonight's dinner, according to Kara's message, was to celebrate Father's Day. That day was a Sunday in mid-June, the year I turned 61. My daughter invited her father to attend with the family to share the joy, and conveniently mark 1 full year since they officially settled in, at least on paper. I opened the truck door, the wind hit my face, and washed the leather smell off my hands, leaving only the cold mountain air. I pulled my flannel collar tighter and looked up at the stone-paved slope leading to the house. The porch lights were on, that deep yellow filament glow that people my age still call rich people light. Every stone step was clean, not a trace of mud, the low hedges trimmed perfectly flat. I'd measured the feet of plenty of customers living around this area. People walked into my shop, set their calfskin loafers on the counter, talked about ski passes, about startups, about campus life. I measured feet, measured arches, breathed in leather, wrote down sizes, and passed no judgment. That was my job. Tonight, I climbed these steps as a guest who'd been invited, but no longer knew which side of his daughter's life he was standing on. The door opened before I could ring the bell. Kara appeared in the doorway, hair pinned up, fitted blue dress, a glass of white wine in her hand. Her phone was wedged between her shoulder and ear, her voice half laughing with someone on the line. When she saw me, she covered the microphone. "Dad's here, hold on." Then she lowered the phone and brushed a quick kiss across my cheek. Expensive perfume, cool and sharp. "Dad, come in. Everyone's already here." In the kitchen, overhead lights flooded the wide granite island. Bar stools, crystal glasses, and a roast, sending up the scent of rosemary. The dining table sat in the center of the room, a long farmhouse-style wooden table, but brand new, gleaming without a single knife mark or ring from a cold glass. Harold Granger, Eric's father, 64 years old, silver-haired in the way of a man who retired early but still plays golf regularly. His wife Diane wearing pearl earrings the size of half a fingertip. 2 neighbor couples from the top of the hill. Plus Laura, Kara's cousin, and her boyfriend. I recognized a few faces that had once come into my shoe shop, but nobody talked about shoes tonight. Here, Gordon's arrived." Eric stood up from the head of the table, wineglass in hand, his voice already touched by alcohol. "Now we're complete. Perfect." He clapped a hand on my shoulder, a bit harder than necessary. The kind of familiarity people use to prove they're more at ease than you are. Sit down, Dad. Right here. That here was a chair near the far end of the table, facing the kitchen, slightly outside the main pool of light. I sat down, my back to the window overlooking the mountains. Plates, knives, and forks were neatly arranged, napkin folded into a triangle. The glass in front of me was a cheaper type than the ones sparkling near Harold and Diane, though that might just have been the trained eye of my trade, too used to telling materials apart. The meal passed with stories in which I played the audience. Eric's recent promotion at his consulting firm, Harold's booking another week in Palm Springs, and the club preparing to change its wine menu. Occasionally, Kara turned to ask me a polite question. Dad, how's the shoe shop these days? I nodded. Fine. People still have feet, still have shoes to wear. The whole table laughed. The light, social kind of laughter. I didn't feel sad about my own answer. It was the truth. After dessert, Eric stood up and tapped his spoon against his glass. The metallic sound striking the crystal rang out clearly, quieting the side chatter. Okay, now comes the fun part, he said, his eyes sweeping the room before settling on Harold. 1 year ago, we officially moved into this house, and with the help of family, of people who truly understand what it means to invest in the future. He flicked a glance at me, very quickly, then looked away. We made it through. So tonight, on Father's Day, which also marks 1 full year of Mortgage Tough, we prepared a small gift to say thank you. I felt the word family catch in my throat. I remembered the bank check envelopes I had quietly left on Kara's table last year. The transfers where the memo line held only a single word, for you. I hadn't done it to have my name mentioned in a speech. I did it because she was my daughter. But silence has its own price. Kara stood up and clapped twice, the sound of her nails meeting sharp and dry. First, she said, eyes glittering in a very material way, I have a small gift for Dad. She turned toward me. In her hand was a small folded slip of paper, the kind torn off at a grocery counter. She didn't hand it to me. She threw it, literally. The scrap of paper sailed across the table in a lazy arc and landed right next to my plate. The whole table burst into laughter, not because it was funny, but because people don't know what else to do but laugh when they see someone made into a spectacle. Quick pick, $3, Kara said, her voice sweet but sharp. Maybe you'll win someday. If you do, remember to share half. Okay, I bought it. I looked at the slip. A Powerball ticket. $3. The thermal paper was smudged with ink along the bottom edge, probably from being held too long. I heard myself say, my voice so calm it surprised even me, Yeah, thank you. My fingers touched the paper, the gritty feel of thermal stock, nothing like smooth leather, but my hands were used to every kind of surface. I smoothed it flat out of professional reflex. At the head of the table, Harold laughed loudly. Hey, don't knock it. People really do win. His voice sounded like someone talking about a fun lottery game, not about his son's father-in-law. Kara turned and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, My dad's very practical. Even if he won, he probably wouldn't spend it. Just stash it in some box. Diane laughed out loud. One neighbor said, He's more the saving type than the spending type, huh? I hadn't even answered when Kara clapped again. All right, now for the real gift. She walked toward the kitchen, bent down to pull a long white paper wrap box with a dark blue ribbon from under a shelf. The kind of box where just the ribbon alone costs as much as a cheap pair of shoes in my shop. She placed it in front of Harold, her movement gentle, like presenting something on a stage. For you, Dad, Kara said, and this time the word Dad belonged to the man at the head of the table, not to me, because no one deserves rest more than you. Harold pretended to be surprised, but his eyes showed the pleasure of someone who already knew something expensive was coming. He untied the ribbon and opened the box. I saw stiff folders. Inside, vouchers printed with a white ship cutting through a blue bay. Alaska cruise, Eric said, unable to hide his pride. 10 days, balcony suite, all inclusive. Nearly $10,000. Amazing, Dad. Kara tilted her head, her voice lowered, soft and rounded like a line well rehearsed. Dad Harold has always put family first. Worked so much without ever talking about it. I see how you spent your whole life taking care of everyone, and now you deserve to rest, to enjoy what you have. Eric nodded along, as if confirming an obvious truth. To me, Dad, you're the model of a real man. Someone who carries the load, who lays the foundation for future generations. Those words sounded beautiful in the room, but they made me recognize a very clear absence. In my daughter's mind, sacrifices that were never spoken had slowly disappeared. She spoke of a father who gave her the life she now had, while forgetting the one who held her hand through the days when there was nothing to show. Forgetting the winter mornings I took her to school through snow. Forgetting the times I chose silence so she wouldn't worry. Forgetting even that some of what she enjoyed today was built from years that would never appear on social media. A cheap gift only hurts for a moment, but being forgotten is quieter and more lasting. I sat there, listening to my daughter speak of another man's sacrifices, while my own had slipped out of her memory at some point without either of us noticing. The neighbor let out a low whistle. Laura blurted, "Wow." Harold leaned back in his chair, holding the booking confirmation the way someone holds a ticket into a world reserved for those who've risen above the rest of the population. "My God, Kara," he said, deliberately raising his voice, "you really are the best thing that ever happened to this family." The sentence drifted across the dinner table, light as wine vapor, but when it hit me, it landed heavy as the sole of a solid rubber boot. Kara smiled, her head tilted slightly, the light catching her cheekbone. I saw her phone screen flare in her hand. She'd opened Instagram. "Okay, everyone," she said, her voice suddenly shifting up a notch. The voice I knew she used for the camera, not for people. "We're going live for a second." I saw that Diane wasn't smiling. She set her glass down, her eyes flicking toward Kara quickly. A cold look. Kara propped the phone up on a small stand she'd brought with her, adjusted the angle to catch Harold with the stack of vouchers on the table, and me farther back with the small lottery ticket in front of me. "Happy Father's Day from Ponderosa Ridge," Kara said to the camera. "Cruise for one, Dad." She panned the lens toward Harold, who was lifting the ticket and grinning. "And a $3 lottery ticket for the other. Cheap Dad energy." The whole table burst out laughing. Eric laughed louder than anyone, his arm slung around his wife's shoulders, pulling her close like part of a show he was producing. I saw comments scrolling fast on the screen. "OMG Dad, that's savage. Cruise Dad versus Budget Dad LOL." Harold turned, raising his glass toward the camera. "To my amazing daughter-in-law," he said. "The best thing that ever happened to this family." Someone clapped. Someone said, "Here, here." A draft slipped in through the back door behind me, blowing cold air against my neck. I didn't feel cold. I only felt a very clear gap between Harold's word, family, and the idea of family I'd carried on my shoulders for decades in the shoe workshop. The smell of wet leather, the steady tap of hammers, Kara's small legs dangling from a high stool when she was 8. Watching me cut each piece of leather, eyes wide with curiosity, I said nothing. I picked up the lottery ticket, folded it in half, then in quarters, then opened it again. Years of trade habits made me want everything flat before putting it away. My fingers still smelled of leather conditioner. I slid the ticket into my flannel pocket, neatly, the way I used to file important receipts into the old oak drawer at the shop. Not because I hoped for anything from it, but because I wasn't used to throwing away anything my child handed me, even if it was only a $3 piece of paper. Dinner ended with handshakes, half-hearted hugs, promises to meet again at a summer barbecue that I knew were just polite noise. When I stepped out onto the porch, laughter was still spilling from the dining room, mixing with the clinking of glasses. The wind on Ponderosa Hill blew harder, carrying the perfume and wine smell off my clothes faster than usual. I went down the stone steps slowly, my hand unconsciously lifting to touch my pocket. The lottery ticket lay still inside, thin and light like it meant nothing, but under my fingers it felt like a fresh bruise. Not discolored yet, but I knew that when I looked in the mirror in the morning, it would show clearly. I opened the car door, sat down, and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, the yellow lights of the villa on the hill were still blazing, like a small stage on the mountain. I turned my face away, letting the sound of the old engine and the smell of leather in the cabin pull me out of that scene. At 61 years old, I learned one thing. Some nights, all you have to do is stand firm, like a line of stitching that cannot be allowed to unravel. And that is the only thing you need. That night, after the glittering Ponderosa Hill party where I was nothing more than a shadow, I returned to the small rented cabin on Baseline Road, where the smell of leather, shoe conditioner oil, and the hum of the Singer 29K sewing machine always kept me grounded. I hung my brown flannel shirt on the hook, turned on the desk lamp, and sat down at the maple work table worn smooth by years. Something pressed at me, like the tap of a blade against wood. I opened my laptop and logged into the business account of Latham's Leatherworks, the shoe shop I built with nearly 4 decades of cutting hides, stitching soles, and pulling thread. The screen lit up, reflecting the face of a man who had just been turned into a joke by his own daughter on a live stream. I stared at the account balance. Short $9,800, exactly the price of the Alaska cruise ticket that Kara had given her father-in-law. Money meant for retirement, for old age, for medication when the body no longer obeys. I pulled up the statement. The transaction sat right at the top. Online transfer, authorized guest access. A chill ran up my spine. Guest access? The permission I had given Kara 6 years earlier when she asked to study bookkeeping to help Dad manage the shop. I had trusted her. I had left her old email listed as a secondary user. Later, Kara said, "I'm not using it anymore." And I, like a soft-hearted father, left it there. Turns out that email was still logged in automatically on her MacBook. I opened the security tab. The bank displayed 2-step verification. Email on file. Everything was brutally clear. I closed the laptop, the metal lid snapping shut with a dry click. The night wind of Boulder slipped through the window crack, cold like the surface of Boulder Reservoir lying still out there. I put on my jacket and drove back to the Ponderosa Hill Villa, not to start a fight, but to hear my daughter say one complete sentence. The villa was still bright, champagne glasses clinking, jazz music flowing evenly. Harold leaned against the kitchen counter, lifting his glass like a man who had never known a hard day in his life. Kara stood beside him, her dress shimmering under the lights, laughing as lightly as mist. I stopped at the edge of the marble floor. "Kara," I said evenly, "did you take money from my shop account?" The living room slowed by a beat. Kara turned, smiling in a way I knew well, half careless, half contemptuous. "Oh my God, Dad," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "That's family money. You don't even spend much. I just transferred it temporarily to buy a gift for Dad Harold." Harold laughed with pleasure. "The girl knows how to think," he said. Eric stood with his arms crossed, leaning on the counter, looking at me like an extra person in a house that wasn't mine. In that moment, I wasn't just dismissed, I was publicly placed one level below everyone else in the room. They didn't look at me as a hurt father, but as a stingy old man ruining a party. I forced my voice to stay steady. "That's money I earned. If I don't agree, no one gets to take it." Kara rolled her eyes. "You live minimally. What do you need $9,800 for? Let me use it, and it actually creates value." Harold raised his glass. "That's right. Young people know how to use money better." They didn't know. They didn't need to know. They didn't see the winters. I stayed up until 2 in the morning stitching shoes to meet Christmas orders, or the days I skipped meals so I could afford better leather for the first pair of shoes Kara wore to a school dance. They didn't see me carrying Kara through the snow when she was sick, or the drives I made taking her to school in an old pickup that rattled and clanked. But now, my daughter stood in the middle of her father-in-law's luxury villa and told a crowd that I didn't need my own money. Not a second of hesitation, not a trace of guilt. I turned and walked out to the back porch. No one called after me. The bolder moonlight spilled across the distant lake, mountain wind whipping against my spine, cold enough to make me strangely clear-headed. I slid my hand into my flannel pocket. My fingers touched the $3 lottery ticket, the thin piece of paper Kara had tossed to me as a joke, the piece of paper the whole room laughed at while Harold showed off his cruise ticket. It rustled softly under my fingers, a sound as thin as the breath of fate. I nodded slightly to myself. Kara had forgotten what I taught her when she was 10, after she took one of my sample shoes, to give to a friend without asking. Nothing in this world becomes yours just because you want it. That night, the wind off Boulder Reservoir blew harder, colder, as if warning that what happened inside the villa was only the first stone rolling down the mountainside, as if warning that this was only the beginning of a long chain of trouble. And I, Gordon Latham, began to feel very clearly that everything under my feet was shifting, no longer the way it used to be. The next morning, Boulder woke beneath a veil of thin sunlight draped over the Flatirons. I rose while the sky was still gray, brewed a cup of black coffee, and stood at the wooden window, looking out at the lake flashing silver. I had barely slept the night before, yet my mind felt unexpectedly clear, sharp in a way that felt like a freshly honed blade. There was no reason to hesitate anymore. I pulled on my flannel, took the account documents, and drove straight to First Colorado Credit Union on Canyon Boulevard. The branch was bright, clean, cold, and quiet like an operating room. The teller's name was Melissa, about 30, polite but not overly warm. "How can I help you, Mr. Latham?" "I want to remove all secondary access, including any old guest access and any email or device that has ever been linked since 2017. Melissa typed a few keys, then frowned slightly. "Sir, the guest access user logged in from a device last night." I looked straight at the screen. "Remove everything. Delete it from the system. From now on, I'm the only one who can touch the business account." Melissa held my gaze for another beat, perhaps recognizing the resolve of someone who had endured enough. "I understand. I'll take care of it right away." Within 15 minutes, every permission Kara had ever held was locked out at the system level. No notification, no warning, no more room for a father's softness. When I stepped outside, the Boulder wind was stronger than the day before, as if it agreed with my decision. I didn't know that that same morning, nearly 17 miles away, another storm was forming. At the same time I left the bank, Kara was standing in the handbag section at Nordstrom Denver Pavilions. Staff later recounted that she picked out a YSL bag priced at nearly $1,900, laughing with two girlfriends, casually live-streaming on TikTok in a shopping day flex. When the clerk swiped the card, the machine flashed. Declined. The beep sounded louder than usual. There were quite a few people gathered around the handbag area at the time. 3 of them were trying on Gucci sunglasses. A Gen Z girl turned to look. A middle-aged customer glanced over, then pretended to browse shoes. While still watching, Kara laughed awkwardly. "Try again." The clerk swiped a second time. Declined. The security cameras caught everything. Kara began to lose her composure. No, that's impossible. Try manual entry." The third attempt. Declined. The receipt printer spat out a short, cold, indifferent sound. And right there, under white lights, amid perfume and glossy tile floors, my daughter began to lose face in front of a crowd. Her skin flushed from neck to cheeks, eyes wide, breathing quick. The 2 friends beside her froze, unsure whether to step forward or back away. One customer raised a phone, pretending to check messages while the camera pointed straight at her. Kara snapped at the clerk. "Your system is glitching. My dad must have messed something up. The clerk remained polite, but firm. Ma'am, the system is operating normally. You may need to contact your bank. That was the moment Kara's pride cracked for the first time. Tiny, but the very first fracture in what had seemed an unbreakable slab of stone. My phone vibrated just as I was filling up at the Gas and Go station. Kara's name flashed on the screen. I answered. Her scream hit my ear head-on. What did you do? My card is locked. You took away my access? Are you trying to humiliate me? Her voice was sharp, piercing, laced with panic. I leaned calmly against the car. I only removed access you never had the right to. That was family money. You humiliated me in front of dozens of people. Do you know that? I took a breath. You embarrassed yourself, not me. There were about 3 seconds of silence. Then a Nordstrom employee's small voice came through the phone. Ma'am, you need to step aside. You're disturbing other customers. Kara screamed, Don't touch me! I heard shuffling, the sound of a bag being set down on a counter, then broken sobbing. The call cut off. I stood there in the wind looking toward the distant mountains. There is a kind of pain that is no longer hot, but cold. Cold as stone. And when it gets that cold, all you can do is keep walking forward. 1 hour later, on TikTok, Kara's video appeared before I could even guess what would come next. She was live streaming from the Nordstrom parking lot, eyes red, mascara smeared, hair disheveled, hands shaking as she held the phone. Everyone, her voice cracked. My dad, my real dad, stole my money. He stole from his own daughter. He locked my cards. He embarrassed me in public. I can't believe the man I thought I knew would do this. The camera shook. Comments exploded nonstop. OMG? What kind of dad is that? Team Kara. Old people get so controlling. Stealing from your daughter is crazy. Within a few hours, the video passed 37,000 views, spreading into the Ponderosa Ridge HOA group, then Boulder Moms, Boulder Neighbors, and even the Boulder Daily Tea Group, the place dedicated to local personalities and family drama. I read what people wrote about me, a man they had never met. With a father like that, no wonder she has to fend for herself. He's jealous because his daughter is successful. Did anyone ask why? No. Did anyone need the truth? No. Social media prefers a simple story. An authoritarian father harming his accomplished daughter. The real story, that Kara stole money from a craftsman father, was too complex, too unglamorous to travel fast. But I knew this much. What spreads fastest is not truth. It is humiliation. And my daughter had just chosen to wield it as a weapon. That night, as I sat in the cabin listening to cars pass along Boulder Reservoir and the wind slip through the window cracks, I understood something clearly. From the moment Kara live-streamed the words, he stole from his own daughter. The battle was no longer about money. It was social warfare, a war of reputation, a war where every word, every comment, every look in the community could become an arrow. I closed the ledger, turned off the light, and sat still in the dark, not out of fear, but to listen for how much more I could afford to lose. And the answer was this: nothing left to lose but the truth. The next morning, Boulder lay under a thin layer of fog rolling down from the base of the Flatirons, draping over the winding roads leading up to Ponderosa Ridge. I woke with my head feeling as heavy as if someone had set a stone on my chest. Yet my hands still followed habit, brewing coffee and pouring it into the enamel mug that had been with me nearly 10 years. Outside, gusts of wind carried the scent of dry pine and the sharp bite of Colorado mountain cold. I picked up my phone just to check order emails, but the first thing that appeared was a notification from the Ponderosa Ridge HOA Facebook group. Kara Latham just posted a warning about financial abuse from a parent. I tapped it. Kara's video of herself crying in front of Nordstrom, along with her accusation that I had taken money from my own daughter, had been reposted in full in the residents group, accompanied by a message from the HOA president. Please be aware and support the Eric Cara family. Financial safety is important in our community. In less than an hour, nearly 50 comments had stacked up. Sympathy, judgment, lawyer suggestions, and speculation about my private life. I read every line, going cold. From 30 seconds of video, people who used to greet me on their porches, who once asked me to resole their hiking boots, felt confident enough to judge an entire lifetime. No one messaged me to ask a single question. What really happened? No one. I thought that was bad enough. But by midday, something worse appeared. LinkedIn, a place meant for work, professionalism, and congratulations on promotions. Eric, Kara's husband, the man who had stood with crossed arms the night before, looking at me like discarded property, posted a long, concerned message. The title read, "It's heartbreaking when loved ones face financial manipulation from those who should protect them." Beneath it was a photo of Kara clutching her head and crying, taken from TikTok with the caption, "Please uplift young people who must face unhealthy levels of financial control. Money can be earned again, but trust is harder to rebuild." More than 300 likes followed, mostly from his co-workers, several people in Denver tech, and even a few new hires at his company. Comments kept appearing. "You did the right thing speaking up. Hope your wife is okay. This is awful to hear. Parents sometimes don't understand boundaries." I read those polite sentences with blades hidden inside their courtesy. They cut deeper than any direct insult I had ever endured. Eric didn't smear me outright. He chose the society-approved route, polite, respectful, full of concern, and let public opinion do the rest. And it did. That afternoon, I left the cabin to stop by Lamont Timber Company to order new hickory boards for the shop. Sunlight broke through the gray clouds, illuminating dust motes floating in the thin winter air. I was familiar there. They knew me as a craftsman, the kind who studied wood grain like reading an old book. But today, everything was different. I walked in. Two people talking near the counter suddenly fell silent. One glanced at me and turned away as if afraid of meeting my eyes. The other stared down at his shoes instead of my face. I asked about pricing. The clerk answered quickly and briefly, without the usual smile. Prices are on that board. If you still want to order, we can check inventory." Still want to order. The emphasis on still landed like I had just been crossed off some invisible list of trusted people. Someone near the door whispered to a friend, "That's him, the stingy old guy from that video." "The daughter on TikTok, right? Yeah, I saw it." I heard every word despite their lowered voices, not shouting, not direct insults, but the kind of covert humiliation Americans specialize in. Silence instead of confrontation, avoiding eye contact, and keeping distance as if the person in front of them carried some socially contagious disease. In a place like Boulder, that hurt more than being cursed at. I signed the lumber invoice with a slight tremor in my hand, not from weakness, but from the sensation of being painted into a color I had never been. Stingy old man. Controlling father. Financial abuser. I stepped outside into wind sharp enough to cut skin. I stood on the threshold, my hand gripping the edge of my flannel, my chest tightening as if bound. A lifetime of working with my hands, raising a child stitch by stitch, never owing anyone a single cent. Yet in just over 24 hours, I had been turned into a negative symbol in my own community. When I returned to the cabin, I set the wood on the table and sat down. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence. That silence was heavy as stone, but beneath its weight, something was shifting, like the distant groan of a metal door preparing to open. I understood one thing clearly. If Kara wanted to use public opinion to bury me at the bottom, then I, Gordon Latham, would use silence itself to force the truth back up to the surface. Late at night, I drove back to the cabin on Baseline Road when Boulder was nearly asleep. The road was dark, mountain wind blowing steadily, carrying the scent of dry pine and the familiar cold of nights when no one is waiting for you to come home. I shut off the engine and sat in the car for a few extra seconds, as if needing confirmation that the long day had truly ended. The looks from earlier still echoed in my head, the looks people give when they think they have fully understood a human being from a short video. Stingy old man, an easy label to stick on, hard to peel off. The cabin was silent when I stepped inside. No voices, only wind slipping through the cracks, and the old refrigerator humming like an elderly breath. I ate a bowl of cold soup without ceremony, washed the chipped ceramic mug, letting the water run a few seconds longer just to have sound. When I pulled my flannel collar back into place, habit made my hand brush the chest pocket. Empty. I checked again, slower, still empty. The lottery ticket. I stood still, staring at the dark stretch of the table. The image came back clearly. Getting home, taking off my shirt, hanging it quickly, then gathering the loose papers, lumber receipts, scribbled measurements, gas slips, and tossing them into the kitchen trash. The ticket must have been clipped somewhere among that thin pile of thermal paper. I bent down and lifted the trash lid. The smell of old coffee mixed with damp paper rose up. Under the soft yellow kitchen light, gray-white scraps blended together like the fragmented memories of a long day. I turned on the TV, not to watch, but to hear human voices. I flipped channels and stopped on the late lottery drawing. The host stood against a bright backdrop, voice even and slow, reading each number like the names of distant places. I froze. By the third number, my heart jolted. By the fourth, a cold sensation ran straight down my spine, as if someone were pulling an invisible wire from the back of my neck to my lower back. I spun back to the trash. Without thinking, I reached in and dug deep, like clawing truth out of mud. The smell of garbage, old coffee, damp paper tangled together. Then I saw it, a crumpled thermal slip, coffee stained at the edge, the top corner folded. The ticket, cheap. Light. I picked it up, my hand shaking in a strange way, not from filth, but from fear of what I was about to face. I pulled out a chair and sat at the table. The Lamont receipt was still there, its corner curled from moisture. I flipped it over, took a pencil, and wrote down the sequence of numbers I had just heard on TV, each faint graphite stroke slightly trembling. Then I opened the ticket, placed it beside the list, and smoothed it flat out of trade reflex, the same way I always flatten a piece of leather before cutting. No rush, no force, just letting everything settle where it belongs. The first number matched. I stopped, my heart skipping a beat. The second still matched. My throat went dry. The third, I had to close my eyes for a second, then open them and check again, afraid the yellow light was deceiving me. I let out a short, shallow breath, like someone surfacing from underwater. The Powerball matched. I checked again, slower, more carefully, like re-measuring a difficult foot when I know that being off by 0.5 millimeter would ruin the whole shoe. There was no mistake, not a single number. I touched the pencil tip to the edge of the paper, my hand trembling lightly, not from joy, but from fear that the hope that had just appeared would collapse if I moved too hard. I called the hotline to verify. The automated voice came on, even and cold, reading the winning numbers like a weather report. Jackpot, 120 million. In that moment, my lungs forgot how to draw air. I stared at the ticket on the table, then at the handwritten numbers, then into the empty space ahead of me, as if the money would vanish if I did not keep it in sight. There was no rush of happiness, no shout, only a dense, heavy silence, where my mind refused to accept that a man who had spent his entire life counting loose change was now standing in front of a number so large he did not know where to place it inside his life. I just sat there, looking around the small cabin, the worn maple tabletop, the chair with a loose screw I had not tightened yet, the tool rack where leather knives lay neatly in line. I looked down at my hands, hands that had stitched leather to raise a child, that had measured feet for people who would never remember my name. The first thing that surfaced in my mind was not money. It was Kara Latham's voice, laughing under yellow light. "If you win, remember to share half, okay?" And the laughter around the dinner table, light and careless, as if filial duty could be wrapped into a joke. In that moment, I understood. This light was not meant to be shown off. It was only enough to illuminate the path for someone who had walked too long in the dark. I folded the ticket again, this time carefully, wiped the coffee stain with a paper towel, placed it into a zip bag, then opened the oak box, the one I used for valuable tools. The ticket lay quietly inside, thin and light, yet the room seemed heavier. I closed the lid, set it on the shelf, and turned off the TV. Silence returned, but it was no longer empty. I told myself, quietly enough that only I could hear, "This is not a miracle. This is a test." The next morning arrived, and I still had not slept. Not from excitement, but because a quiet suspicion kept circling in my head that last night had been some kind of mistake, as if the moment I fell asleep, reality would reset itself, and that lottery ticket would turn back into a meaningless scrap of paper. I stayed awake, my mind stretched tight, sharp and dry, like mornings when a major order had to be delivered on time, when one small error could collapse an entire reputation. I brewed black coffee and stood still, watching steam rise from the old ceramic mug. In my head, a survival rule repeated itself, clear as a chalk line on a workshop floor. Until there is official confirmation, no one gets to know. I did not call Kara. I did not open social media. I told no one I knew. Silence now was not avoidance. It was discipline. The discipline of someone who had lived by his hands, who knew one wrong cut could ruin an entire hide. I called a lawyer who specialized in lottery claims and estate management. His voice was calm, practical, without flair or promises. He asked exactly what mattered, no detours. Was the ticket intact? Had I signed the back? Did anyone know yet? I answered each question briefly. On the other end, he paused for a beat, and then delivered the key sentence, slow and firm. "You don't need to be happy right now. You need to be safe." That sentence put everything in its proper place. I asked for a checklist, as precise as setting a shoe last. Sign the back of the ticket. Photograph it from multiple angles. Seal it in a zip bag. Store it securely. Do not take it out except to the lottery office. He emphasized each point, his voice dry and decisive, like driving nails. Every word spoken can be dissected, and every well-timed silence is a layer of armor. I followed the instructions step by step. No more, no less. Signed, photographed, sealed. Placed the ticket into the oak box where I kept my valuable tools, and closed the lid. My hands did not shake. My pace did not rush. A craftsman survives on process, not on luck. I drove to the lottery office, a place that still felt strange for someone like me to enter. Glass and steel, cold and clean, security and cameras everywhere. This world was nothing like my wooden cabin and leather shop. Here, no one looked at me like a man who had won the lottery. They looked at me like a file. Strangely, that reassured me. I felt small, not because I was poor, but because the system was enormous. The clerk who received the ticket did not congratulate me. No expression, just procedure. I slid the ticket through the glass slot. They asked me to complete a claim form, present identification, and sign a receipt before retaining the ticket for verification. The ticket was scanned, examined, code-checked, every movement precise, cold. Then the clerk said evenly, neutrally, "This ticket is a jackpot winner. We will proceed with official verification." They explained further, still without emotion, the 120 million figure was the advertised amount. If I chose the lump sum option, the actual cash values would be approximately 70 million before taxes. They presented two options, a one-time lump sum via bank transfer or an annuity paid over 30 years. I chose the lump sum. No cash on the table, no briefcase. Just a wire transfer into an account in my name, accompanied by signatures, paperwork, and a waiting period. No applause, no celebration, just the beginning of a long chain of procedures. In that moment, I understood my real fear. I was not afraid of being robbed, not afraid of being sued. I was afraid of being turned into the villain again online, distorted, labeled, dragged into a filthy narrative where truth had no place. I remembered Kara's video. I realized something very clearly. Big money does not break people. Public opinion does. Trouble seeds itself quietly. The clerk lingered on my name a second longer than necessary. Another pair of eyes glanced at the file. A casual remark. "Your name sounds familiar." That was all. But I had lived long enough to know. One crack is enough for information to leak. And the first person to smell money, I did not need to guess, would be Kara. While I kept silent, the narrative outside was being built. Eric began posting. LinkedIn first, then Facebook. Lines perfectly tuned to public sentiment. Family is responsibility. Protect the ones you love. Financial transparency. He did not name me. He did not have to. Everyone knew who it was about. The tone was polite, measured, moral, the kind of voice that makes readers nod without demanding proof. I read it, then closed it. The lawyer's warning echoed, "Do not speak. Speaking puts you on the chopping block." The lottery informed me the verification process would take several days, followed by legal and tax consultations and payout arrangements. I signed the documents, left the glass and steel building, and returned to the cabin on Baseline Road. Boulder felt colder, as if winter were testing the door early. I opened the oak box and looked at the ticket lying quietly inside. It no longer looked like money. It looked like a newly sharpened blade, bright, precise. I closed the lid and thought, without saying it aloud, "This thing is not money. It is a knife. Used correctly, it saves you. Used wrong, it cuts everything to pieces." That afternoon, Baseline Road was quieter than usual. The sky was gray, the wind skimming low across the ground, carrying the thin, sharp cold of late-season Boulder. I was inside the cabin, wiping down my leather cutting knives, an old habit that steadies the mind, when the sound of sudden breaking tore through the stillness. I didn't need to look out the window to know who had arrived. Kara Latham. The door flew open without a knock. She walked straight in, dress immaculate, heels so clean they looked out of place on Baseline Road gravel. Her eyes lit up, not with the look of a daughter seeking her father, but with the look of someone who had just caught the scent of ownership. No greeting, no preamble. "I heard," Kara said, her voice short and fast like reading a breaking headline. "Your name's on the list. Don't play dumb. Half is mine." I set the knife down, wiped my hands, and turned to face her. Not surprised, just the confirmation of what I had already anticipated. I spoke slowly, evenly, with the voice of a man who had spent years measuring the feet of wealthy people without ever asking anyone for a handout. "The ticket was a gift. That's the end of it." Kara smiled, a thin, familiar smile that flickered and vanished quickly. "That's what you're saying?" She stepped closer, her eyes sweeping the room like she was taking inventory. "I have witnesses. Everyone at the dinner heard me say it. I said it myself. If you win, you split it with me. There's a live stream, there's video. That's a verbal contract." Her tone shifted instantly, from amused to cold, from cold to sharp. She recited it like something rehearsed. Witnesses, words spoken, context, public opinion. "You think staying silent is enough? There's no silence anymore. People will listen to me." I didn't interrupt. I let her finish. Then I answered, still slow, still steady. "The money used to buy the lottery ticket was money you secretly withdrew from my account." I looked straight into her eyes. "You used stolen money to buy a gift. You gave that gift to me, and from that moment on, it became mine. You stole, then demanded a share of the very thing you stole and handed over." The words landed heavy and final. Kara froze for a beat. Then she snapped back, fast and cutting. "You're insulting me. I'll sue. I'll call the media. I'll let all of Boulder know who you really are." She tilted her head, lowering her voice into a warning. Who do you think they'll believe? I understood. I had seen how she worked at Nordstrom, online, in carefully edited clips. I said my last sentence without raising my voice, without sarcasm. You do whatever you want. I'm done speaking. Kara stood there for a few seconds, as if waiting for me to soften. I didn't. She turned and walked quickly out the door. It slammed shut, shaking the whole cabin. The sound echoed, then died, leaving behind a very clear emptiness. I stood there looking at the door. I didn't follow. I didn't call out. For the first time in my life as a father, I did not take another step to appease my child. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I understood this. There are boundaries that, if you don't hold them, love becomes nothing more than an excuse to be torn apart. The next morning, my phone would not stop vibrating. Unknown numbers one after another, messages stacking up, rushed interview requests, legal consultation emails promising free help, calls that hung up the moment I answered. I flipped the phone face down on the wooden table, let it buzz a few more times, then shut it off completely. Inside the cabin on Baseline Road, the sound felt like trapped insects, chaotic, frantic, and carrying nothing good with it. Kara had made her move. I knew that before even opening social media. Facebook, HOA groups, Nextdoor, spaces people like to call for the community, were all running the same story, framed in the same familiar moral language. My father stole my lottery ticket. Reverse elder abuse? Financial control? The wording was carefully chosen, heavy enough to provoke outrage, vague enough to require no proof. Eric handled the rest. LinkedIn first, then it spread to other platforms. His tone was measured, polite, dressed up as reflection. Ethics, responsibility, family. He didn't mention my name. He didn't have to. The public likes that kind of voice. It lets them feel righteous without asking another question. The consequences came fast. I felt it the moment I stepped outside. Glances that slid past and turned away. No one shouted. No one confronted me. Just deliberate avoidance. The kind of silence in Boulder that weighs more than an accusation. Neighbors stopped, nodding. At the lumber store, answers got shorter. At the coffee shop, conversations paused when I walked in, then resumed behind me in a different rhythm. The change was subtle, but clear enough for someone who lives by his labor to recognize he had just been labeled. I didn't go online to argue. I didn't defend myself. I chose the opposite. Deliberate silence. I saved every post, screenshotted every comment, logged timestamps, arranged everything into a sequence. I learned to watch the crowd's fury like a process. Every strike leaves a mark, and marks always have an order to them. The lawyer called and repeated his earlier warning. Absolutely do not speak. 10 seconds, he said. 10 seconds cut out of context will travel faster than the truth. I understood. I had watched Kara do exactly that, with edited clips. I wasn't giving them more material. Night fell and the cabin returned to quiet. I sat alone, not weak, just clear-headed. And for the first time, I saw the core of it plainly. This was no longer the story of a disrespectful daughter. This was Kara and Eric using the crowd as a hammer, striking again and again until people forgot to ask where the hammer came from. I took a deep breath, held my silence, and waited. The call came while I was in the cabin, my hands still carrying the smell of leather conditioning oil. An unknown number. I hesitated for a beat, then answered. On the other end was the voice of a well-educated woman. Cool, direct, the familiar tone of people who stand straight in brightly lit rooms. Gordon, this is Diane Granger, Eric's mother. She paused very briefly, long enough for me to understand this was not a social call. I was there that night. I saw everything, and I cannot let them continue doing this. No apology, no filler, just the truth placed squarely on the table. Then she continued, slow and clear, and in that moment I understood the most important thing. She had not been on my side at the beginning. She said she had deliberated for a long time, This was her son's family matter, and by ordinary standards, she should stay out of it. "I'm not calling because I stood with you from the start," she said. "I'm calling because I haven't been able to sleep." She spoke of her faith in God, in what is right and what is true, and after watching Kara and Eric turn a family matter into a calculated campaign of reputation, using the crowd to pressure an older man into silence, she saw no alternative. "If I stay silent," she said, "then I am lying through that silence. I can't do that." "I don't agree with what they're doing," she added, her voice still cool but no longer rigid. "And because of my faith, I cannot stand still." We agreed to meet at an old diner near Canyon Boulevard. Faded red vinyl boots, hot black coffee, the smell of bacon in the air, everything the opposite of the gold-lit luxury at Ponderosa Ridge. Diane arrived exactly on time, neatly dressed but not showy, a solid-colored scarf, a simple watch. She sat upright, with the eyes of someone accustomed to judging people by actions, not words. She set her coffee down, looked at me, and said plainly, "I'm not here to befriend you. I'm here to speak what is right, and to do what I believe God does not allow me to avoid." She spoke first about Eric, her disappointment at seeing her son use a moral tone on LinkedIn to borrow community credibility. Polite, measured language, but hollow at the core. "That is not protecting family," she said. "That is shielding ambition, then dressing it up as morality." Then she spoke of Kara, the way the girl used emotion and the crowd to pressure her own father, turning pain into a tool. Diane emphasized a boundary she considered inviolable. A gift is a gift. Family does not mean entitlement. "My faith does not allow me to call greed kinship," she said. She recounted the dinner with the voice of a longtime observer. Kara had tossed the lottery ticket across the table like a joke, without respect, without seriousness. The line "share half" was nothing but a tease, meant to make me smaller in front of an audience. No conditions, no agreement, nothing but a performance. Diane concluded, her voice not raised but firm. "A joke does not become a contract just because a jackpot appears later, and God does not call that fairness." Her counterstrike was not loud. Diane knew where to strike. She posted a short, measured, straightforward statement in the HOA group and on her personal Facebook. She had been present at the dinner. The lottery ticket was a Father's Day gift to me. There was no agreement to share winnings, and she opposed the smear campaign damaging the dignity of an older working man. No dramatics, no attacks, just a confirmation of facts in the manner of someone who believes truth does not need to shout to stand. The post did not explode, but it clarified things. People began rereading the story at a different pace. The tone of comments shifted, no longer quick verdicts, but questions. Should we hear both sides? Then came people saying, "I was there too." Witnesses who had stayed silent began to speak. The original video was rewatched, more carefully, more slowly. Details once skimmed over were now held up to the light. Public opinion did not flip overnight, but it understood, and once it understood, it was no longer easily steered. I began receiving very different messages. Cautious apologies, quiet, "I misunderstood." Late nods from people who had avoided my eyes. No spectacle, no declarations, just agreement arriving slowly, but enough for me to know I was no longer standing alone. The legal news arrived on a gray morning. There was no cheering, no sense of winning or losing, just a short email from my attorney, the tone dry and precise like a technical report. Kara's case was very weak, nearly without standing. A gift remained a gift. There were independent witnesses. The lottery process had been completed lawfully. There was no verbal agreement with any legal weight. If they continued, the risk of losing was high, and costs would escalate quickly. I finished reading and closed the laptop, not relief in the sense of victory, just the feeling of a long-held weight finally being set down, allowing my breathing to return to a normal rhythm. The legal chapter was closed. The rest, I knew, belonged to people. That afternoon, while I was in the cabin on Baseline Road, there was a knock at the door, much lighter than before, not urgent, not forceful. I opened it. Kara stood there, simple dress, tired face, red eyes, no heavy makeup. Her voice trembled like she had been holding everything back for a long time before deciding to speak. "Dad," she said quietly, "can we talk?" I left the door open, neither inviting her in nor sending her away. She stepped over the threshold, looking around the cabin as if standing in a foreign place. Then she sat on the edge of the chair, hands tightly clasped. The story poured out along a familiar path, debts piling up, banks calling nonstop, foreclosure papers on the kitchen table, pressure from Eric, work slipping away, expenses once considered normal, now turning into burdens. She spoke fast, without pause, as if afraid I might interrupt. "I don't have any other way," Kara said, her voice breaking. "I just need $3 million. To you, that amount is nothing. Just to keep the house, to save the family." $3 million. The number came out smoothly, as if practiced many times. I looked at her and recognized every fold of an old performance. I had seen that look when she was little, as she grew up, and even as an adult, each time she wanted to cross a boundary. The same carefully timed trembling hands, the same softened voice on the word "dad," the same calculated touch meant to pull at sympathy. I wasn't angry, just tired. "I'm not using money to save you from your choices anymore," I said slowly. "I can love you, but I can't buy the consequences for you." Kara looked up. The tears were still there, but her tone shifted quickly, from soft to hard. "So you're letting me lose my house?" I didn't dodge the question. "You're making yourself a hostage," I said. "I don't accept that." Kara's face darkened. The softness dropped away, revealing something sharp underneath. "Then we're done. You won't see me again. No birthdays, no holidays. You'll live alone, and you'll die alone." The cabin went still. I could hear the wind slipping through the cracks, the old refrigerator humming faintly. I stood there. The pain had cooled long ago, only clarity remained. "If love is used as a hostage," I said, "then it isn't love anymore." Kara stood up abruptly. No goodbye. The door closed, not violently this time, but decisively. I stood there a while longer. I didn't call after her. I had lost many things in my life. This time I did not break. I left Boulder on a clear morning. No noise, no long goodbyes. I didn't leave out of fear, but because I wanted peace. Some places are once home, and then one day they exist only to remind you of what is already closed. I changed my phone number, narrowed my old connections, folded a chapter of my life the way you fold a finished hide. Not discarding it, just setting it down where it belongs. The new town didn't need to know who I was. That made me lighter. Here, people greet each other with a look, ask questions through the work in their hands. I opened a shoe shop on the edge of town, just big enough, natural light pouring through the windows, the familiar smell of leather blending with wood and glue. When I placed my hands on the hides hanging from the racks, I could feel every grain, every mark of time, the feeling that had fed me for decades. Honest labor has its own memory, and my hands still remember it well. I worked alongside a few young people. No long lectures, just showing them how to measure a foot accurately, how to cut leather without rushing, how to stitch each seam so a pair of shoes can walk with someone for years without hurting them. I taught them that some things are worth keeping, not because of price, but because of the effort invested. Slowly, I understood I didn't need noise to live usefully. I needed a steady rhythm and a place where I could put my hands down without being suspected. From there, I started a small fund for single fathers. No publicity, no burning money. The fund supports vocational training, work tools, rezoling worn shoes so someone can keep going to work, paying tuition on time and legal help when needed, practical things that help people stand upright. I understand the feeling of losing a spouse, of raising a child alone, of being looked at with pity. I also know that sometimes one timely opportunity is enough to keep a family from collapsing. As for Kara, I heard through others. The loan couldn't be managed in time. The bank moved forward with foreclosure. The house once shown off as a symbol landed on the forced sale list. At the same time, old noise left scars. Credibility declined, opportunities closed, and both their careers drifted off course. Money became fuel for long arguments. Who pays, who owes, who promised and didn't keep it. In the end, what once bound them together became the very thing that pulled them apart. The marriage ended quietly, without spectacle. Kara lives alone now, washing dishes at a small diner, staying temporarily in a run-down place. That isn't punishment. It's simply the consequence of choices already made. In the small room behind the shop, I hang a copy of the lottery ticket in a simple oak frame, the same wood I once used for my cutting table. Not to boast, just to remind myself that sometimes the thing that gets tossed away, belittled, laughed at, is the very thing that saves you. I turn off the lights, lock the door, and listen as the shop settles into quiet. The night is still. My hands are light, and for the first time in a long while, I know I am living in the right place. People ask me, after everything, whether I lost or gained. I think about that question for a long time. I lost a child, at least the image of the child I once believed in. But I kept something more important: dignity, boundaries, and the right to live according to the work of my own hands. Money didn't make me stronger. It only revealed what was already there: greed in others and the resolve that still remained in me. If you're hearing this story and see some part of yourself in it, a father, a mother, a worker who's been dismissed, turned into the bad one simply for saying no, remember this: silence is not always weakness. With the right timing and the right person, truth carries its own weight. Thank you for staying to the end. If this story touched you, leave a like or a comment to share your thoughts. So those going through something similar know they're not alone. And if you want to keep hearing stories about quiet justice, about boundaries and dignity reclaimed in very human ways, subscribe to the channel. I truly appreciate it.